After World War II, the world was left in chaos and destruction. A new war ensued that would reshape the Middle East and continue to have lasting effects for many years to come. Israel's creation in 1948 was a realization of Jewish hopes for a homeland, but also produced a powerful and ongoing struggle with the Arab people of Palestine. This is a story of dreams, betrayals, broken promises, and actions that are still hotly debated in modern history. This story dates back to the late 19th century with the establishment of Zionism, a movement demanding that there be a homeland for Jews in Palestine. Throughout most of the European territories, there were Jewish persecutions, from violence-plagued Russia to persistent discrimination in Western Europe. The urgent need and great importance of that vision emerged for Zionism. The center of the dream would come in Palestine, whose meaning has roots in deep history and spirituality for Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike. At the same time, the land had more and more Arab people living there, who believed they had the right to take care of the land. Their hopes for independence clashed directly with the increasing number of Jewish immigrants and settlers. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire fell apart, and Palestine was put under British control by a League of Nations mandate. To try to balance different interests, the British issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917. This declaration showed support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, but they also promised to protect the rights of the Arab population. Balancing these promises proved difficult. During the 1920s and 1930s, tensions grew as many Jewish immigrants came to Palestine to escape increasing anti-Semitism in Europe. Arab leaders strongly opposed this influx, fearing dispossession and domination, and violence erupted in clashes and uprisings. The situation had become highly unstable by the end of World War II. The horrors of the Holocaust deeply affected global opinion. The struggles of Jewish survivors without homes in Europe after the war made many Western countries feel it was important to help create a Jewish state. Yet the question was still, where? For Zionists, the answer was clear: Palestine. But the Arab population, which was two-thirds of the people living in the area, disagreed and demanded the right to decide for themselves. The British, trying to keep control while facing increasing unrest and violence from both Jews and Arabs, finally chose to leave and passed the issue to the new United Nations in 1947. In a highly charged and controversial choice, the United Nations suggested splitting Palestine into two different states, one for Jews and one for Arabs, while making Jerusalem a shared international city because of its religious importance. This plan, explained in UN Resolution 181, gave 55% of the land to the Jewish state and 45% to the Arab state, even though Jews were only about a third of the people living there at that time. The Jewish leaders, including David Ben-Gurion, agreed to this plan, seeing it as a step towards having their own country. For the Arab people, this was profoundly unjust. They asked how a small group, some of whom had only recently arrived, could be granted most of the land. The Arab League and Palestinian leaders completely rejected the plan and promised to fight against it in every way they could. This is the most important moment because of its political reflection on the times. It shows that at the early stages of the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union had both supported the partition plan for different reasons as their rivalry intensified. The US, led by President Harry Truman, was influenced by a mix of concern for people, pressure from Jewish groups, and Cold War strategy. Several smaller countries were pressured to support this plan, while countries in Latin America played a key role in its approval. On May 14, 1948, the British mandate ended and David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the formation of the State of Israel. The United States acted rapidly in its recognition, and the Soviet Union soon followed. But even before the ink was dry on Israel's founding document, war started. The nearby Arab countries, including Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq, invaded, promising to defeat the new Jewish state and help the Palestinians. What happened next was a violent and chaotic fight that would change the region. Despite the difficulties, the Israeli forces managed not only to defend their land, but even expanded it by taking crucial areas allocated for the Arab state based on the UN plan. To the Palestinian Arabs, the 1948 war is called the Nakba, meaning catastrophe. More than 700,000 Palestinians were forced to flee or were driven out of their homes and became refugees in neighboring countries and other areas. Entire villages were destroyed, and the inhabitants have faced a grim and uncertain future due to their lost homes. To this day, the descendants of these refugees, who are millions strong, are living in different camps across the Middle Eastern states, unable to return to their families' former homes. The Nakba is one of the most contested and painful chapters of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For some historians, it is viewed as forced displacement, whereas others believe it was inevitable because of the war. The Palestinian Arab state was to be located on that land, which instead ended up being divided between the new state of Israel and the two countries, Egypt and Jordan. Jordan occupied the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, while Egypt controlled the Gaza Strip. The dream for a Palestinian state came to an end in the course of a long and painful conflict. The role of the United States and the United Nations in these events is very important. Truman's choice to recognize Israel was both compassionate and strategic, as he felt pressure from people in the country and wanted to counter Soviet influence in the Middle East. At first, U.S. aid to Israel was not very large compared to the huge support that would follow in later years. In 1949, the UN set up the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, to help with the Palestinian refugee crisis. Still, even though it was involved at first, the UN could not make its own partition plan work or settle the status of Jerusalem, allowing these problems to grow worse over time. The establishment of Israel and the subsequent Arab-Israeli war marked the beginning of a conflict that is still current today and continues to make news, influencing global politics. The competing narratives of Jewish survival and statehood versus Palestinian displacement and dispossession remain as polarized today as they were in 1948. For Israelis, their independence represents the fulfillment of an ancient dream, a beacon of resilience and triumph over unimaginable adversity. For Palestinians, it is a story of loss, betrayal, and the ongoing struggle for justice and self-determination. These events sparked one of the longest and most emotional conflicts in modern history. The borders made or changed by war are still argued about, and there is no real
by the
peace
late
in view.
90s.
The world, through what the UN, the US, and other powers did, helped create Israel, but it also shares the blame for the problems facing the Palestinians today. After World War II, one war ended and another began, a war that would come to define the Middle East and capture the world's attention for more than 7 decades. That is the story of Israel's troubled beginning, a story of hope, sadness, and ongoing conflict that still affects the world today. What do you think about this complex history? Do you have questions or views you want to share? Let's keep talking about this in the comments section below. We want your thoughts. Just remember to subscribe for more looks into history and politics. Thanks again for watching, and we see you next time.